For more of this kind of content, you can subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment. The sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting elongated shadows across the dense forest. Lucas tightened his grip on the bundle of firewood in his arms, his rugged silhouette outlined against the fiery glow. He was a man of few words, his life solitary and simple, save for the companionship of Rex, his fiercely loyal German shepherd. They had an unspoken bond, a connection forged through years of hunting, camping, and surviving in the wilderness. But today, something was different. Rex, who rarely displayed anything beyond calm confidence, had returned to Lucas in a frenzy. The dog barked, circling him with a wild urgency that Lucas had never seen before. "What is it, boy?" Lucas asked, dropping the firewood as a chill ran down his spine. Rex barked again and darted into the underbrush, glancing back only once to ensure Lucas was following. The man, guided by instinct and trust in his canine partner, grabbed his hunting knife and hurried after him. Branches clawed at his arms, and the forest seemed alive with an ominous energy. They stopped at a clearing. At first glance, Lucas thought it was a body human, perhaps. But as he approached, his breath caught in his throat. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. Slumped against a mossy rock was a figure of otherworldly beauty. Her blue skin shimmered faintly in the dying light, and her green hair, like strands of silk, framed a face that was strikingly human, yet unmistakably alien. She clutched her side, where a dark, viscous liquid oozed through her torn garment. Lucas knelt cautiously, his green eyes scanning her features. He didn't have time to dwell on her beauty. Her shallow breaths and pained expression told him she was on the brink. "Rex, stay back," he ordered, his voice firm. The dog obeyed but remained alert, growling low in his throat. The alien woman's eyes fluttered open. They were an iridescent green, like emeralds catching sunlight. For a moment, they locked onto Lucas's, and he felt an inexplicable pull, a connection he couldn't explain. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low and steady despite the tumult in his chest. Her lips moved, and a soft, melodic sound emerged, like a song in a language he didn't know. Then, as if piecing together his tongue, she managed a single word. "Linda," she whispered. The name hit Lucas like a jolt. His grandmother's stories, wild, fantastical tales about a visitor from the stars named Linda, flashed through his mind. He had dismissed them as ramblings, the stuff of campfire lore. Yet here she was, vivid and real. "What happened to you?" Lucas asked, his gaze dropping to the wound at her side. "Who did this?" Her voice came again, stronger this time. "Enemy." The word was heavy with meaning, spoken with a ferocity that belied her fragile state. Lucas hesitated only a moment before making his decision. Scooping her into his arms, he felt the warmth of her body against his own, her weight surprisingly light. He could feel the faint rhythm of her pulse, a reminder that she was alive, for now. Back at the cabin, Lucas worked quickly. He laid her on the couch, using his hunting supplies to clean and dress the wound. Linda's eyes never left him, their gaze piercing and unrelenting. "Why were you in the woods?" he asked, once the worst of the bleeding had stopped. "How do you know my name?" She hesitated, her lips parting as if to speak, then closed again. Finally, she said, "You are more than you know, Lucas. Your blood, your family, it connects us." Lucas frowned, his mind racing. "What are you talking about? My family's dead. You're mistaken." Linda sat up slightly, her movements graceful despite her injuries. Your family's legacy lives in you, and because of that, you're in danger." As if to punctuate her words, a low hum filled the air, vibrating through the walls of the cabin. The windows rattled, and Rex barked furiously. "What is that?" Lucas demanded, grabbing his shotgun from its place by the door. "They've found me," Linda said, her voice cold and resolute. "And now, they've found you." Before Lucas could respond, the cabin door slammed open. Shadows poured into the room, moving with an unnatural fluidity. Rex leapt toward the intruders, teeth bared, as Lucas cocked his shotgun. Linda rose to her feet, her commanding presence filling the room, despite her weakened state. "You have to choose now," she said, her green eyes blazing. "Fight, or let them take us both." Lucas's grip tightened on the shotgun. His heart pounded, not just with fear, but with a rising determination. Whoever or whatever these enemies were, they weren't taking her without a fight. "Let's see what they've got," he growled, stepping in front of her. Linda smiled faintly, her confidence infectious. "Good," she said, "because this is only the beginning." The battle had begun. The intruders were like living shadows, their forms flickering and shifting as they advanced into the cabin. Their eyes glowed a sickly yellow, and the air around them pulsed with an unnatural chill. Rex lunged, teeth flashing, as he tore into the nearest shadow. The creature shrieked, a sound that cut through the air like nails on glass, before dissolving into a cloud of black mist. Lucas steadied his shotgun and fired at the closest figure. The blast echoed through the cabin, shattering the tension like thunder. The creature staggered, its semi-corporeal form momentarily disrupted, but it didn't fall. Instead, it reassembled itself, advancing again with a guttural hiss. "They don't die easily," Linda said, her voice calm but urgent. She stepped forward, raising a hand. A burst of green light shot from her palm, striking another shadow. This time, the creature disintegrated entirely, leaving only a faint trace of ash in the air. "Use their energy against them," she instructed. "Bullets won't be enough." Lucas fired another round, buying himself a moment to grab a silver knife from the table, a relic his grandmother had always kept close. He slashed at an advancing shadow, and to his surprise, the blade tore through its form, sending it howling into oblivion. "Silver works," he muttered, gripping the knife tightly. He turned to Linda, who was surrounded by a faint aura of green light, her movements fluid and precise as she dispatched another shadow. She moved like a warrior, her elegance undercut by the raw power emanating from her. The cabin was chaos, shadows swirling, light flashing, and Rex darting through the melee, snarling and biting. Lucas could feel the strain in his arms as he fought, his muscles burning with effort. But through the chaos, he couldn't ignore the strange connection he felt to Linda. Every time she cast her green light, a faint warmth surged through him, as if their energies were linked. Finally, the last of the shadows fell, vanishing into nothingness. The cabin was eerily quiet, the only sound the ragged breathing of man, woman, and dog. Linda leaned against the wall, her shimmering skin now pale with exertion. "They'll send more," she said, her voice heavy. "They won't stop until they have what they want." Lucas wiped the sweat from his brow, his green eyes narrowing. "And what is that?" Linda hesitated, her expression guarded. "Me," she admitted. "And you." "Me?" Lucas's voice was incredulous. "I'm just a guy trying to live off the grid. What could they possibly want with me?" Linda stepped closer, her gaze intense. "You're more than you think, Lucas. Your blood carries the legacy of a line that was meant to bridge the gap between our worlds." "Our worlds?" Lucas echoed, his grip tightening on the knife. "What are you saying? That I'm connected to you?" Linda nodded. "Yes. Long ago, your ancestors and mine forged a bond, one that was meant to unite our people. But something went wrong. The connection was severed, and the power your family carried was buried. Until now." Lucas shook his head, struggling to process her words. "This is insane." "It's the truth," Linda said, her tone unyielding. "And it's why they want you. If they capture you, they'll use your blood to unlock that power for destruction, not unity." Lucas exhaled sharply, running a hand through his blonde hair. "So, what am I supposed to do? Just keep fighting these things forever?" "No," Linda said, stepping even closer. "You have to help me find the artifact that can seal the bond and stop them for good." Lucas frowned, his instincts warring with the logic in her words. "Why should I trust you? For all I know, you're the one putting me in danger." Linda's green eyes softened, a vulnerability breaking through her steely exterior. "Because if I wanted to harm you, I could have left you to them," she said quietly. "But I didn't. I need you, Lucas. And whether you like it or not, you need me too." The sincerity in her voice struck a chord in Lucas. He didn't want to believe her, but the evidence was undeniable. His grandmother's stories, the shadows, the strange pull he felt toward Linda, it all pointed to something far bigger than himself. "All right," he said finally, his voice steady. "I'll help you. But you'd better start explaining everything." Linda nodded, relief flickering across her face. "I will," she promised. "But first, we need to move. They'll be back, and we can't fight them here again." Lucas glanced around the cabin. It had been his sanctuary, his refuge, but now it was a war zone. He sighed, grabbing a backpack and shoving supplies into it. "Rex stays with us," he said firmly, glancing at the dog, who wagged his tail in agreement. Linda managed a faint smile. "I wouldn't have it any other way." As the three of them stepped into the night, the forest felt alive with possibility and danger. The battle was over, but the journey was just beginning. Lucas didn't know where it would lead, but one thing was clear. His life would never be the same. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the forest as Lucas, Linda, and Rex moved swiftly through the underbrush. The night was quiet, save for the rustle of leaves underfoot and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. Yet, the tension between Lucas and Linda was palpable, a silent energy humming between them. After hours of trekking, Lucas stopped near a small clearing by a stream. "We'll rest here," he said, his voice low but firm. "We need to be ready if those things come back." Linda nodded, lowering herself onto a smooth rock by the water. Her green hair shimmered under the moonlight, and for a moment, Lucas found himself unable to look away. She was captivating, her otherworldly beauty unlike anything he had ever encountered. But it wasn't just her appearance, it was the way she carried herself, confident and unyielding, yet with a vulnerability that peeked through in rare moments. "You're staring," Linda said, her voice tinged with amusement. Lucas blinked, his cheeks flushing slightly. "Just making sure you're holding up," he replied gruffly, turning to unpack his bag. "I'm stronger than I look," she said, her tone playful. "But thank you for your concern." As Lucas prepared a small fire, Linda watched him, her green eyes tracing his movements. There was something about his rugged, no-nonsense demeanor that intrigued her. He was unlike anyone she had ever met on Earth or beyond. His quiet strength and unwavering loyalty, especially to his dog, spoke volumes about his character. When the fire crackled to life, they sat in its warmth, the silence between them heavy, but not uncomfortable. Rex lay nearby, his head on his paws, watching his companions with curious eyes. "Do you trust me?" Linda asked suddenly, breaking the quiet. Lucas looked at her, his green eyes thoughtful. "I don't know," he admitted. "I want to, but trust isn't something I give easily." Linda nodded, her expression softening. "I understand, but I need you to know that I trust you, Lucas, more than anyone I've met in a long time." The sincerity in her voice struck him. He didn't respond right away, instead tossing a stick into the fire and watching the flames dance. Finally, he said, "Why me? Why not just go on your own?" "Because there's something about you," Linda replied, her voice quieter now. "Something familiar, something I can't quite explain." Lucas felt a flicker of heat rise in his chest, not from the fire, but from her words. He didn't know what to say, so he stayed silent, his mind racing. As the firelight flickered, their eyes met. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with an unspoken tension. Lucas was the first to look away, clearing his throat as he shifted uncomfortably. "We should get some sleep," he said, his voice a little rough. Linda's lips curved into a small smile. "Of course," she said, lying back on the grass and gazing up at the stars. "Good night, Lucas." "Good night," he muttered, lying down on the opposite side of the fire. As he closed his eyes, he could still feel her presence, as if she were somehow tethered to him. And though he tried to push the thoughts away, he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward her, an undeniable attraction that defied logic, but one he could no longer ignore. The forest was silent, but Lucas's dreams were anything but. He saw flashes of Linda, her green eyes filled with intensity, her voice calling his name. When he woke, the fire was reduced to embers, and Linda was sitting close by, her face illuminated by the soft glow. "You were restless," she said softly, her tone free of judgment. "Bad dreams." Lucas rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding her gaze. "Something like that." Linda leaned closer, her movements deliberate but unthreatening. "You don't have to push me away, Lucas. Whatever you're feeling, it's okay." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, Lucas was at a loss. She had a way of cutting through his defenses, peeling back the layers he had spent years building. "I don't know what I'm feeling," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Linda placed a hand on his, her touch warm and grounding. "Then let's figure it out, together." Their eyes met, and this time, Lucas didn't look away. The distance between them seemed to vanish, the connection between them growing stronger. There was no need for words. The understanding passed silently between them, like an unspoken promise. As they sat in the fading light, the world around them seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them. It was a moment of vulnerability, of trust, and of something far deeper that neither of them dared to name. And though the night still held danger for that brief moment, Lucas felt a flicker of hope. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The tranquil moments by the fire were shattered in an instant. A piercing, otherworldly shriek echoed through the forest, and Rex leapt to his feet, barking furiously. Linda was already moving, her green hair a blur as she scanned the darkness. "They're here," she hissed, her voice sharp with urgency. "And they've brought reinforcements." Lucas didn't waste time asking questions. He grabbed his shotgun, slinging the strap over his shoulder, and unsheathed the silver knife. "How many?" he asked, his green eyes narrowing as he listened to the approaching sounds, branches cracking, leaves rustling, and the unmistakable hum of unnatural energy. "Too many to fight alone," Linda replied, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "We have to split them up. If they swarm us, we won't stand a chance." Before Lucas could respond, a shadowy figure emerged from the tree line. It wasn't alone. Dozens of the creatures poured out of the darkness, their glowing yellow eyes fixed on the pair. The air turned icy, and the clearing felt like it was sinking under the weight of their collective presence. "Move!" Linda shouted, grabbing Lucas's arm and pulling him toward the stream. Rex bounded ahead, barking ferociously as he led the way. They sprinted through the forest, the shadows in relentless pursuit. The creatures moved unnaturally fast, their forms twisting and flickering like smoke as they closed the distance. Lucas fired a shot behind him, the blast momentarily scattering a few of them, but it was clear they were outmatched. "We need to create a diversion," Linda said, her voice breathless, as they reached a cluster of boulders by the stream. "Something to slow them down." Lucas glanced around, his mind racing. His eyes fell on a fallen tree trunk nearby. "If we can get them across the water, we can bottleneck them there." Linda nodded, already understanding his plan. "I'll draw their attention," she said, her tone resolute. "You and Rex set the trap." "No way," Lucas protested. "We stick together." Linda turned to him, her green eyes blazing. "If we stick together, we die together. Trust me, Lucas." He hesitated, torn between his instincts and the logic of her words. Finally, he relented. "Don't do anything stupid," he muttered, grabbing Rex's collar and moving toward the fallen tree. Linda stepped into the open, her hands glowing with green energy. "Come and get me," she shouted, her voice ringing out like a challenge. The shadows surged toward her, drawn by her defiance. Lucas and Rex worked quickly, pushing the heavy log into position across the narrow stream. It was just wide enough to form a bridge, but unstable enough to collapse under pressure. "Come on, Linda," Lucas called as the shadows reached the edge of the water. Linda turned, sprinting toward them with the creatures hot on her heels. Her green energy flared, creating a barrier that held the shadows at bay for precious seconds as she crossed the makeshift bridge. "Now!" she shouted as she reached the other side. Lucas didn't hesitate. With a mighty shove, he and Rex dislodged the log. It teetered for a moment before crashing into the stream, taking several of the shadows with it. The remaining creatures howled in frustration, their glowing eyes watching from the opposite bank. "That won't hold them for long," Linda said, catching her breath. "We'll make it work," Lucas replied, gripping his knife. "Come on, there's a cave up ahead. We can regroup there." As they ran, the shadows regrouped, their shrieks growing louder. Lucas glanced at Linda, who moved with a grace and determination that belied her exhaustion. He couldn't help but feel a surge of admiration and something deeper. The cave came into view, a dark opening in the rock face. They dove inside, the air cool and damp. Lucas set Rex to guard the entrance, while he and Linda prepared for the next wave. "They'll find us soon," Linda said, her voice steady but low. "We need to be ready." Lucas nodded, his green eyes scanning the cave for anything useful. "What's the plan?" he asked. Linda stepped closer, her presence commanding, despite their dire circumstances. "We make our stand here," she said. "But there's something you need to know first." "What?" Lucas asked, his pulse quickening. Her gaze was intense, almost pleading. "The connection between us, it's stronger than I realized. You're not just a part of this. You're the key." Lucas opened his mouth to respond, but a deafening crash cut him off. The shadows had found them, their forms spilling into the cave like a dark tide. Linda raised her hands, green light blazing as the battle began anew. Lucas gritted his teeth, stepping into the fray with knife and shotgun at the ready. Together, they fought like a single unit, their movements in perfect harmony. The cave echoed with the sounds of battle, but through it all, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. And as Linda's green light illuminated the darkness, Lucas felt a spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could survive the chaos. The cave echoed with the chaotic clash of light and shadow. Linda's green energy pulsed and flared, cutting through the advancing creatures, while Lucas moved with raw precision, his knife slicing through their forms and his shotgun delivering blasts that disrupted their cohesion. Rex, ever the loyal protector, lunged at anything that came too close, his snarls blending with the cacophony. Despite their combined efforts, the shadows pressed forward relentlessly, their numbers seemingly endless. "We can't hold them off forever," Lucas shouted over the noise. "I'm working on it," Linda called back, her hands glowing brighter as she sent another wave of energy toward their enemies. But even as she fought, Linda's movements faltered. Her strength was waning, and the green light that once radiated with power now flickered like a dying flame. "Linda!" Lucas yelled, stepping in front of her to shield her from an incoming attack. He drove the silver knife into a shadow's chest, watching as it dissolved into black mist. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice was weaker. She placed a hand on Lucas's arm, her touch sending a jolt of warmth through him. "There's something in this cave, something ancient. I can feel it. We need to find it." "Now's not exactly the best time for a treasure hunt," Lucas growled, firing another round into the horde. "It's not treasure," Linda said sharply. "It's the artifact, the one that connects us. If I can activate it, we might have a chance." Lucas didn't fully understand, but he trusted her. "Where is it?" She closed her eyes for a moment, as if listening to the cave itself. Then her green eyes snapped open. "Deeper in. Follow me." "Rex, with me," Lucas called as they retreated further into the cave. The shadows surged after them, their shrieks growing louder, but Linda's energy flared, creating a temporary barrier that gave them a few precious seconds. The tunnel narrowed, twisting and turning until they reached a cavernous chamber. At its center stood a pedestal carved from black stone, and atop it rested a small, glowing orb. The orb pulsed faintly, its light alternating between green and silver. "That's it," Linda said, her voice reverent. "That's what we need." As Lucas approached, the air around the orb seemed to hum with power. He reached out, his hand hovering over the artifact. "What do I do?" "Touch it," Linda said. "Let it recognize you." Before Lucas could ask what she meant, the shadows breached the chamber. They poured in, their shrieks filling the air as they closed in on all sides. "Now, Lucas!" Linda shouted, her energy flaring in one final desperate effort to hold them back. Lucas didn't hesitate. He grasped the orb, and the moment his fingers made contact, a surge of energy shot through him. His vision blurred, and the world around him seemed to dissolve into a blinding light. When the light faded, Lucas found himself standing in a vast, star-filled expanse. Linda was beside him, her expression one of awe and fear. "What is this?" Lucas asked, his voice echoing in the void. "This is the bridge," Linda said, her voice trembling. "The connection between our worlds." As she spoke, a figure emerged from the stars, a tall, regal being with shimmering blue skin and eyes like burning suns. The figure looked at Lucas with an intensity that made his heart race. "Lucas," the being said, its voice resonating like 1,000 whispers. "You are the keeper. The bond between our people rests within you." "What does that mean?" Lucas asked, his grip tightening on the orb. "It means you have the power to unite us or to destroy us," the being replied. "But the choice is yours." Before Lucas could respond, the vision shattered, and he was back in the cave. The orb in his hand blazed with light, and the shadows recoiled, their forms disintegrating under its brilliance. Linda collapsed to her knees, her green eyes filled with tears. "You did it," she whispered. Lucas knelt beside her, his heart pounding. "What did I do?" "You awakened the bond," Linda said, her voice trembling with relief. "The connection between us, it's stronger now, and it's our only chance to survive." As the last of the shadows vanished, the cave fell silent once more. But Lucas knew the battle was far from over. He looked at Linda, her strength returning, as she gazed at him with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper. "We're in this together," Lucas said firmly, his green eyes meeting hers. "Whatever it takes." Linda nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. Together. The glow of the orb dimmed, casting the cavern into an eerie silence. Lucas held it tightly, its residual warmth pulsing in his hands. He glanced at Linda, who seemed both relieved and burdened, as though the activation of the artifact had solved one problem, but revealed another. "Well, what now?" Lucas asked, his voice low but steady. Linda stood slowly, her green eyes scanning the chamber. "Now, we prepare. The bond has been awakened, but that means they'll come for it, and for us, with everything they have." "Who are they, exactly?" Lucas demanded, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "These shadows? Some alien army? You keep talking about them, but I don't even know who we're fighting." Linda sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "They're called the Maroon. They're a faction from my world, exiled centuries ago for their ambition to dominate. The bond between our worlds, what you just awakened, is the one thing powerful enough to stop them. They know it, and they'll stop at nothing to destroy it." Lucas clenched his jaw. "And this bond, it's connected to me somehow. Why?" Linda hesitated, her gaze dropping to the ground. Because your family wasn't just random humans. Your ancestor was the first keeper, the one who forged the bond in the first place. His bloodline was imbued with the power to maintain the connection. That power has been dormant in you, Lucas, until now. The revelation hit Lucas like a freight train. He staggered back, his mind reeling. You're saying this? All of this has been waiting for me? My whole life, I've been nothing but a guy trying to get by. And that's exactly why you were chosen, Linda said softly. You're not just a fighter. You're someone who cares, who protects. It's in your nature, Lucas. The bond recognized that. He ran a hand through his blonde hair, his frustration giving way to resignation. So, what happens if we fail? Linda's expression hardened. If we fail, the Maroon will sever the bond entirely. Not only will our worlds lose their connection, but their armies will pour into your world unchecked. Earth will fall. Lucas looked at her, his green eyes narrowing with determination. Then we don't fail. As they exited the cave, the forest was eerily calm, the night air heavy with an unsettling quiet. Rex padded ahead, his ears pricked and alert. Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, even as the shadows seemed to have retreated. We need to find a safe place to regroup, Linda said, her tone clipped. The orb's energy is drawing them even now. We can't stay in one place for long. Lucas nodded. I know a spot, a hunting cabin a few miles out. It's off the grid, secure. We can make a plan from there. They moved swiftly through the trees, the moonlight their only guide. As they walked, the silence between them grew heavier. The weight of the bond, the connection now pulsing between them, was almost tangible. Lucas felt it in every step, every glance they shared. It was as if their fates were no longer separate, but intricately intertwined. Lucas, Linda said after a long stretch of silence, there's something else you need to know. More secrets? He quipped, his voice edged with humor despite the gravity of their situation. Great. She smiled faintly, but didn't respond immediately. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. The bond doesn't just connect our worlds, it connects us. Lucas stopped walking, turning to face her. What do you mean? She stepped closer, her green eyes searching his. The power of the bond isn't just in the orb or your bloodline. It's in us, together. It grows stronger when we're aligned, when we trust, when we fight as one. Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Lucas felt his pulse quicken, not just from her proximity, but from the truth in her voice. The connection he had felt from the moment they met now made sense. It wasn't just attraction or circumstance. It was something far deeper, something that defied logic and explanation. Do you feel it too? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucas hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I do. Linda smiled, her expression a mixture of relief and something more. Then maybe we have a chance. Before Lucas could respond, a distant howl shattered the moment. It wasn't Rex. The sound was otherworldly, chilling, and unmistakably hostile. They've found us, Linda said, her voice sharp with urgency. Lucas raised his shotgun, his green eyes scanning the darkness. Then let's show them what this bond can do. Linda's green energy flared to life, illuminating the forest with its otherworldly glow. Rex growled, standing protectively by Lucas's side. The bond pulsed between them, a shared strength that ignited their resolve. And as the shadows surged toward them once more, Lucas and Linda stood united, ready to face whatever came next. Together. The air hummed with anticipation, as Lucas, Linda, and Rex stood at the edge of the ancient clearing. The trees around them loomed like silent witnesses to what was about to unfold. Ahead, the Maroon gathered, their forms a writhing mass of shadow and light, their glowing yellow eyes fixed on the glowing orb in Lucas's hands. This is it, Linda said, her voice steady but laced with tension. The bond is at its strongest here. If we can hold them off long enough, I can channel its power to seal the connection between our worlds permanently. And if we fail, Lucas asked, his voice low. Linda didn't look at him. We don't fail. Lucas nodded, gripping the orb tightly. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, but so did the connection, the bond that pulsed between him and Linda. It wasn't just power. It was trust, shared purpose, and something deeper. The Maroon advanced, their forms solidifying into humanoid shapes. Their leader stepped forward, a towering figure with skin like obsidian and eyes that burned like molten gold. Keeper, the leader said, its voice a guttural growl. You cannot stop what is coming. Surrender the orb, and I may grant you a swift end. Lucas smirked, his green eyes blazing with defiance. Sorry, not my style. The Maroon leader roared, and the army surged forward. The clearing erupted into chaos. Linda's green energy flared, creating a protective barrier that held the first wave of Maroon at bay. Lucas fired his shotgun, the blast tearing through their ranks, while Rex darted between the shadows, his teeth flashing as he took them down one by one. But the Maroon were relentless, their numbers overwhelming. For every one they defeated, two more seemed to take its place. "Lucas!" Linda shouted, her voice cutting through the noise. "I need time to activate the orb fully." "Time's not exactly on our side," Lucas shouted back, slashing through a shadow with his silver knife. "Trust me," Linda said, her green eyes locking with his. "I can do this." Lucas hesitated, then nodded. "Do it. I've got you." Linda knelt in the center of the clearing, cradling the orb in her hands. Its glow intensified, casting the forest in a blinding light. The Maroon howled in rage, their forms convulsing as they tried to push through the barrier to stop her. Lucas and Rex fought with everything they had, their movements a seamless dance of man and beast. Every strike Lucas made, every growl Rex unleashed, was fueled by the bond that connected them to Linda. He could feel her energy coursing through him, strengthening his resolve. But then, the barrier faltered. A powerful blast from the Maroon leader struck Linda's shield, shattering it. She cried out, the orb slipping from her grasp. "No!" Lucas roared, diving to catch it. He landed hard, the orb clutched tightly in his hands. Its light flared again, but it was weaker now, flickering like a dying flame. The Maroon closed in, their leader towering over Lucas. "Your defiance ends here," it growled, raising a clawed hand. "Not today," Lucas snarled. With a surge of adrenaline, he plunged the silver knife into the leader's chest. The creature screamed, its form collapsing into a swirling void of black mist. "Lucas!" Linda called, her voice filled with desperation. "I need you." Lucas turned, the orb glowing brighter in his hands. He ran to Linda, placing it back in her grasp. "Do it!" he shouted. "I'll hold them off." The Maroons swarmed toward them, but Lucas stood his ground, his green eyes blazing with determination. Every fiber of his being was focused on protecting Linda, on giving her the time she needed to finish what they had started. Linda closed her eyes, her hands tightening around the orb. Its light pulsed, growing stronger and stronger until it enveloped her completely. The connection between her and Lucas surged to its peak, a powerful wave of energy that flowed through them both. "Now!" Linda cried, her voice resonating with otherworldly power. The orb's light exploded outward, a brilliant wave of green and silver that swept through the clearing. The Maroons screamed as the light consumed them, their forms dissolving into nothingness. Lucas shielded his eyes from the intensity of the light, but he could feel its warmth, its power. When it finally faded, the clearing was silent. The Maroon were gone. Linda stood, her green eyes glowing softly as she looked at Lucas. "It's done," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The bond is sealed. They can't come through anymore." Lucas staggered toward her, his exhaustion evident. "You did it," he said, his voice rough with relief. "No," Linda said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "We did it." As the first rays of dawn broke through the trees, Lucas and Linda stood together, the orb still glowing faintly in her hands. Rex trotted over, his tail wagging as he pressed against Lucas's leg. The battle was over, but the bond remained, stronger than ever. And as they looked out over the clearing, Lucas knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Together, they had rewritten the destiny of two worlds, and together, they would protect it.